Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm JJ Flazanes, your empowerment strategist and producer and network creator. In case you don't know, I now have the Empowering Minds Network, where you can find all of my shows. Thanks for downloading today's episode. Today we're going to talk about astrological compatibility with Sophie Wan. I'm excited to share this conversation with you. We did do a video, so go on over to jjflazanes.tv if you want to meet her or see her. And I will remind you that while in this conversation, she's Vedic astrology, and I know I've not really covered that on the show, and I'm not really covering it today. A little bit, we talk about the differences. But for those of you that are hardcore Western astrology, I want to remind you I do have 2 courses on how to use astrology, and we kind of go deep into that. And you can find that at my website, jjflazanes.com, under Engage and then online courses. So it's always there available for you if you want to take a deeper dive into astrology, especially in the way that I use it. So Sophie Wan is a Korean American, world-renowned Vedic astrologer of high-profile entrepreneurs, TV personalities, and the founder, chief executive officer, and chief astrologer of Reha app, a global Vedic astrology app for self-discovery and relationships. In addition to Reha app, Sophie is the co-founder of a spiritually based Web3 NFT community called the Destiny Magi, filled with fellow entrepreneurs, artists, and crypto enthusiasts. Sophie's mission is to bring the forefront of spiritual practices and philosophies of all kinds, not limited to just Vedic astrology. She's focused on leveraging technology as a vehicle to bring esoteric practices worldwide in a modern and mindful way. I hope you'll enjoy today's show. Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm excited to talk to you today about astrological compatibility. I have with me Sophie Wan. And if you watch Indian Matchmaker, you may recognize her. So we're going to have a discussion today. If you're finding this on YouTube because you're looking for Sophie, know that this is my show. My name is JJ, and I will be talking. And if you don't like me, that's okay with me. But if you want more of just Sophie, where can they find more of just you?
They can find me on Instagram at Sophie S. Wan. I have an app, Reha app. You can find me there too, Reha_app.
Great. And if you're listening on the podcast, obviously by now you know we did a video. So come on over to jjflazanes.tv to meet Sophie. Sophie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be on your show.
It's funny that when your people reached out to have you on the show, that it was just the same time I had started, and I haven't continued, but I started watching Indian Matchmaker. And I was like, wait a minute. And so it just felt sort of divine timing that we could have this conversation. And so for those of you that haven't watched that show, Sophie is the astrologer for the show and has met with at least, I know you did at least one, but do you constantly, or did you just do one season?
I was in season 2, and I'm a partner's personal astrologer, but I've also read for a lot of the castmates on that show too. So it just kind of spiraled into one person and then a few people. But I'm predominantly on season 2.
Excellent. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about how you became an astrologer and a little bit about the difference of, I have never done a show on it, and this won't be the time to dive into that super deeply, but you do Vedic astrology. And so I just want to acknowledge sort of the difference between, well, I guess I did a little bit with the astrologer that I worked with, Stephanie Shea from Jan Spiller. We might have talked about a little bit more on the course than on the show, but I'd love to hear your perspective too. So why don't you tell us how you got started in all this?
Yeah, so I actually first became interested in astrology because I've noticed that the people I date have around the same birthday. So 2 people back to back, same exact birthday. And then just in general, like I found myself attracting a lot of December, January birthdays. And I was like, that's kind of weird. Like, I wonder why that is. And so that one question spiraled into a whole deep dive into birthdays because, if you really closely assess around you, people that you've dated, your best friends, like you'll notice that there are specific birthday patterns. And this isn't just something that I found, like my girlfriends, so many of them would have this situation. And, for myself, I was like, this is a really odd pattern. And so I actually really, really became interested in astrology because it was a way for me to understand my own dating pattern in a weird way, like in a kind of a fun, cosmic, oh, how do I really relate to the universe kind of way, like this very existential kind of way. And so from there, I started studying Western astrology. became super interested in Western astrology, but then I found Vedic astrology because as I was doing more research, I discovered that in Indian culture, 90% of the marriages that happen, they take astrology matching very, very seriously. Like it's a whole situation, and a lot of times it's like a yes or a no based off of the astrology, which I think is, it just kind of blew my mind. And so I was like, whoa, like there's a whole, a whole situation going on here. Like there must be something to this because, Indian traditions are centuries old. So that's actually how I like ended up with, finding Vedic astrology. It was really purely from my own dating experience. And then it just kind of like I rabbit hole down this very long path.
I hear you on that. So I guess in Western astrology, you're a Capricorn.
So in
or you're Sag.
No, actually Cancer. So in Western astrology.
Oh, so you were doing the opposite.
Exactly. And so I kept attracting my polarity partner. Cancer
Yes.
Capricorn is like totally a thing. And
Yep.
I find that most couples will attract their polarity partner. And so that was definitely for me. But my moon is actually in Sagittarius, hence.
In Western astrology?
In Western astrology.
Me too.
Oh, nice.
You were saying you were recognizing that and I did the same. That's how I got interested in astrology, was noting energetic behaviors between people who maybe didn't have as much in common, but somehow there was this attraction and polarity, like you said, and just sort of noticing like Pisces, Scorpio, and right. And so and the differences between the combinations, and then asking those questions. And I was, I'm a Pisces. And so you and I are very compatible in terms of friendship, being a water sign in Western astrology, water sign sun, but fire moon, and more so Sag moon, in terms of the way that we think about things, what we're interested in, how we view the world, how we deal with emotions, how we, in that kind of truth seeking part. And and I have a similar story with why I started learning more about astrology, is because I would be frustrated that people, like if I was looking at a situation and I looked around and it was horrifying for me, or it was really upsetting, I would wonder why everybody else wouldn't feel the same way. I was like, why does everybody else look at it this way? What are you all, stupid? And it wasn't good because it was very judgy of like, I can't believe you're so insensitive that you would not think this is terrible. And then the more I started learning about astrology, I realized they don't look at it the same way. They're not insensitive. They really just don't look at it or interpret it the same way, which is what then started to open me up to looking at it from a different point of view, noticing the differences, and it made a lot more sense, and it was way more compassionate and understanding than me just judging everyone and thinking they're stupid. So that's kind of how I'm right. And it helped me navigate communication. It helped me navigate attraction. It helped me navigate friends. Like you noticed that maybe you and your friends either had polarity or the same. I went one step deeper early on to see a lot of people had the same like moon, either a Sag moon or a fire moon. Right. And I think I attract a lot of fire moons who otherwise maybe we might not be compatible on the suns, but the moon, boom, like it's there, that communication. I'm not too much. They understand, they can keep going. So, okay. So let's talk about where you went next with this. So you learned about it, and then like what made you start doing it? Were you sort of at a place where you were trying to find a career path, or did you do it on the side?
So I was definitely doing it on the side. I was working in corporate retail doing merchandise planning, which is very, very different from what I do now. And, astrology really helped me with what I call my first existential crisis. I think we all can relate to having those. And it really made me feel like, okay, and at the time I was actually going through my first Saturn's return. So it's like, okay, there's a situation that I can relate to, and it's beyond just like me. This is like, there's like a whole universe out there, the solar system. And so with that, I was going through my first Saturn's return. And for people that don't know, it's really a pinnacle time where a lot of change happens in your life, anywhere from between 28 to 31. And so that was kind of the first part of this whole career shift. And I think I was due for a career change. Like I was due for like change, and I was really passionate about it. I was doing it on the side. I had gotten really good at reading Western astrology, and a lot of my friends were coming to me and they're like, we want to pay you. And I was like, oh, like, okay, cool. And so, I mean, it first started off with me like doing this at like dinner parties because I would practice. And then it turned into like, wow, like people really resonate with what I'm saying. And so I kind of had this little side hustle going, doing astrology readings. And I was super passionate about it. My ex at the time was like, you should do this full time. Like, you're so good. And I always knew I wanted to create my own business and my own company. I just had no idea what. Like, and I just struggled for years because, like, I don't know what. I don't really know what I'm passionate about. And I think that a lot of people can relate to that. It's like, you don't want to do what you're doing now, but then you don't really know what the next step is. And so I feel like it was truly divine timing. And I have Venus in the 10th house. So it's very appropriate that love and like my significant other would encourage this huge career shift because, the 10th house is career and Venus being love. Like it's like a catalyst into inspiring career stuff. And so I had interestingly coordinated my last day of work with the pandemic. Like obviously had no idea the pandemic was coming, but like I put in like a 3-month notice because I wanted to give my boss a heads up. We're still really good friends. And interestingly enough, it was like, oh, and then the pandemic happened, which, for me was perfect timing in a weird way because it allowed me to really work through, sit on my business, which is really creating the app, write all this content, and really think about like, what do I want to do for the next phase? Like, if I had to stick with doing something for the next 9 to 15 years, like what would that be? And I just was like full in on like wanting to do astrology. It's like, if I could do that for the rest of my life, that would make me so happy. And that's really how, it was like a slow transition, but at the same time it was like a divine transition, right? Because it all happened during Saturn's return, which is just like so like right on point. It's like, wow, of course this would happen during such a pinnacle, growth moment.
So you're somewhat of a newbie then only a couple of years, which is impressive. Can I ask how you got yourself on Indian Matchmaker?
Yeah. So that's it. Like, it wasn't like I was looking for that kind of opportunity. I had essentially met, like, I was co-working out of a friend's apartment and he was like, hey, my other friend's going to stop by. Like, do you mind? And to be honest, I was kind of like, oh, like, I don't really have time for chit chat. Like, I got to work. But I was like, okay, yeah, totally up for it. Fine. So my friend's friend stopped by and he's like very much a chatty person. He's like, what are you doing? What's going on? I was like, oh, I want to create this astrology app. It's going to be for the Indian market. It's Vedic astrology. And he was like, that's so random. That's so cool. I won a charity auction item to do a Zoom meeting with one of the stars of Indian matchmaking. Have you heard of this show? I was like, that's so random. Like it really felt like it was so divinely orchestrated. And I was like, I love that show. Watched it during the pandemic. I would love to be on your Zoom call. Sure, sign me up. So like he's like, okay, great. I'm gonna organize the whole thing. And like he's a very like sporadic random person regardless. So like him like bidding on this charity Zoom auction item was very like, oh wow, that is totally you. But anyways, a month later, I get on the Zoom call with a partner from Indian Matchmaking and like her just really hit it off. Like there are like maybe 10 other people on the Zoom call and it's literally just me and her chit chatting, talking about life, talking about her astrology, because I was like, oh, I'm a Vedic astrologer. I loved like your little clip where you meet with a Vedic astrologer. And it happened to be that she was going to be in Paris the exact same time I was going to be in Paris. So it's like, oh my God, we got to meet up. Let's do dinner. And I want to finish reading the rest of your astrology. And so we exchanged phone numbers and met up. And like that really started a friendship. And so I had no idea they were going to do season 2. Like that was not right. They ended it and it had been some time. And like we became really good friends. And then randomly she was like, hey, there's going to be a season 2 that comes out. And I told the producers about you. And like, do you want to be on the show? And I was like, what? That's so crazy. Like, so it just really happened divinely. Like, and I feel like a lot of people, when they think about huge, huge moments in their life, it's like, you don't really have to force anything. Like, it's not like I was like, constantly like DMing the producers or what. Like, it just truly was like in my, I feel like it was destined. And as long as you focus on, I do a lot of affirmation work as part of my practice. And as long as you focus on yourself, your divine alignment and affirmation work, etc., like everything that you ever dream of comes true. Like, I truly believe that. And that for me was like a testament, because as you say, like, it's not like I've been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, I really, really started my astrology journey back in 2016. So really, you're right in that, like, it's not like I'm like the, most well versed. Like, I'm still very much in my like astrology study. It's like a lifelong dedication, because astrology, it's like never ending how much you can learn. But I really feel like that friendship was such divine alignment, and that even that opportunity, I wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm going to be friends with her because there's going to be a second season. I had no idea there was going to be a second season, and it just happened so organically. And yeah, that's kind of how I believe, like, everything, even with love happens in the same way, as long as you focus on yourself. If you focus on the things that you really, really envision in your life, like, that's what really calls in your partner. So and I mean, obviously I get a lot of questions about compatibility, because that's definitely something that I specialize in and I'm like obsessed with. But that's a little bit about how I ended up on the show.
Well, and I didn't mean you were new at astrology. I just meant you were new business.
Oh yeah, totally.
And totally. Because I mean, for me, one of the things that I've been a business owner since 2001, and it's taken many iterations, and I've grown. It's grown me. I've learned and deepened what I want to be doing. I've focused on what I want to be doing more. Mm-hmm. The more I learn, the more I grow or change, and new things come out of that, of course. And it wasn't until I'm sort of a retired personal trainer, and before that, like entertainer, actor, singer, dancer, but this whole while learning science and in the training world, interviewing doctors, and I became friends with someone that I'd had on the show. She's a very well-known cancer doctor, Dr. Nisha Winters. And after a couple of conversations with her and her talking about, we're in alignment about emotions playing a huge role in disease, both in healing and in manifesting disease. And it was the first time I knew it. I've always known it, but I didn't expect the medical community to also agree with me. And when she did, I went kind of crazy. And then she's talking about like training all these doctors. And I'm like, okay, well, what are you teaching them about emotions? Because that's my lane. And that's all. I mean, I talk about it ad nauseum with my personal training clients who didn't really care to hear it, but I'm such a good trainer to protect their joints and get results and deal with all the whole person. Mm-hmm. They'd kind of go along with it and they'd listen, and I was entertaining, but they weren't that interested in me as a coach, just as their trainer. And at some point I realized, like, I have to just like embody this and step into this in a much bigger way. And even with my first podcast, I was doing all of it. And then I sort of allowed myself and gave myself permission to put out spirit, purpose, and energy, and allow that to just do its thing. And then I just didn't have any attachment to it. And all of a sudden, 2 months after I launched the show, people are writing to me like, this is changing my life, and I want more. And what are you doing? And I was like, holy cow, I don't have anything to sell them, or I have nowhere to put them. And like, why? And it shouldn't have surprised me, because I teach law of attraction, and you're talking about like being in alignment, and whether it be through affirmations or however anyone gets into alignment. But when I would do that show, because a lot of them were solo shows or talking about spirituality, when I would do that, it's what I loved. It's what I loved. It's what I literally won't shut up about all the time. And of course it was the one that attracted all the people. Of course it was what, I was trying to sell stuff to make a living. And I am passionate about all of it, mind you, but that was where I was in most alignment. So it wasn't a judgment about that you were a new astrologer. It was that you were a new business. And what a amazing, like you said, divine timing affirmation that the universe is saying, you're on track, keep going. This is where you need to be. And I think that's awesome. So congratulations. Totally. And so I love knowing, and that's one of the things, I mean, I watched one of the episodes you were on season 2, because I jumped ahead. And I did watch a couple of the episodes in season 1, and I really love the astrological piece, whether it be Vedic or Western, whatever. I recently was looking up people's compatibility charts, friends and colleagues and clients that I have, to sort of answer some questions or intuitive hits that I had. And I always go, like, when I'm like, I have this intuitive feeling, and then I go back to astrology and I'm like, okay, let's see what that says. And then I go read and I go, yep, that's what I'm feeling. And I go, just let the universe do its thing. Let it all work out. And even reading my own, because I had a relationship, my ex-husband and I started my podcast to save my marriage. So all things that I've learned and applied have been to either grow me, create, more compassion, to be understanding, to have more tools, to see what I could do to help our relationship. But when I go back now, I even just read my current partner, who's my life partner forever. When I read our compatibility and how different, then I went back and read my ex-husband's. I was like, oh, it was there. It was right there. It said it right here. You just didn't want to see it. And I wouldn't have changed it. It was exactly the way it was supposed to be. Everything has worked out exactly the way it's supposed to be. But I love that when you talk about compatibility, and before we started recording, I thought, what a perfect word, because it's also like you and I, or astrological compatibility for anyone who's listening. Those of you that know, if you fire in your chart, or if you have a fire moon, most likely you're going to be able to feel me, or you and I might resonate. And if you don't, you may be like, whoa, she is too fast. She talks too fast. She's too intense for me. And I'm okay with that. But I don't take it personally. Why? Because we're not compatible. So let's talk about the compatibility piece in astrology. And of course, it's always great. And that's what ultimately that you want is what the people are really ready, really interested, and want help with it. You want to say, hey, I can help you. So for anyone that's interested and you want to have Sophie do a reading for you, where would they go to learn more about that?
They can go to my website, sophieswan.com, and just send me an email. I still do readings. I love doing my readings because it helps me, well, number one, like, make sure that I'm like very much always, learning, and like being able to tap into that energy of like, oh, does that resonate with my clients? Is it not? Because it's always a fine tuning. But sophieswan.com, you can just send me an email. My email contact is there. I loved what you said about compatibility in the sense of understanding the partnership. And I think that a huge misconception, it really annoys me, is that people think that compatibility is a yes or no to your marriage. Like, if the and it's like a box to check off. Okay, we're compatible, cool, we can get married, or we can start a business or whatnot. And a lot of my clients come to me very distressed because they'll do the compatibility, they go to their, Indian pundit priest, and they're like, oh, compatibility doesn't look good, and then the parents are really against the marriage. And at the end of the day, compatibility isn't supposed to be a yes or a no. It's really supposed to be like, these are the areas of opportunities where you can grow and learn and challenge yourself. And these are the areas of opportunity where you have a lot of alignment, and it's really good. And it's meant to actually be a guiding tool into growth and understanding of your partnership. And a lot of times people mistake that as like we're not compatible, it's not going to work out. It's like, whoa. Like, that is not what I'm saying. And oftentimes I think people kind of will abuse that to like dismiss the work it actually takes in a relationship, because every relationship, whether you're high compatibility, low compatibility, they all take work, and no one really wants to own up to that. And so that's definitely something that I try to teach my clients, because they come in all distressed, and I'm like, okay, listen, is it like the easiest situation? No, but does it mean that you're doomed? Like, I've read for people who have been divorced and they had great compatibility. I'm like, well, I know now why you got married. And then I've read for people that have horrible compatibility. They're still going strong 30 years later. And it's because at the end of the day, like, you both as human to human have decided to work towards your marriage and your relationship. So I think that that's definitely something I really wanted to, make a point into saying, is that compatibility is not supposed to be this like box you check off of like, okay, I can marry this person, or like, oh, nope, can't marry this person. It's like, that is not what it's there for.
Amen, sister. You're speaking my language. Everyone's like, yep, that's exactly what JJ would have said. Because it's not about, it's not about, are we compatible? And I always say, it's not about whether you're compatible. It's where the points are that you may be different, that you have to grow and expand and learn. And even like yesterday, working with a client looking at his astrology, I said, there's no good nor bad. There are strengths and weaknesses. There are shadow sides. There are imbalances. And we look at what's the good part about this. How does this serve you in a good way? And then when is it out of balance? And how can you tell when it's out of balance? And how do we balance this air energy and this, right, into the body more? Well, maybe we use meditation. Maybe we use tapping. Maybe we use exercise. Maybe we use music. I don't know. But like for that person individually, it's taking the information and working with what you have. It's like going to your kitchen and deciding that you want to make a meal and just trying to figure out what to use with what's there, what goes well together, what doesn't for today's meal. It's not but yes. And like, I love what you said. And again, my audience is probably at nauseum with me saying this, but it's about the work. Every relationship takes work, and some relationships are easier in some ways because, like you and I have Sag moons. My partner and I now have Sag moons. My last relationship was a Libra moon. And the Libra Sag moon could be okay.
Yeah.
If one can learn to not get stuck in the head of always doubting and being ambivalent and not, right. Again, I'm talking Western astrology, but, so I love that. And yes, speaking of the choir on that one, and I love that you affirmed that with everyone who's listening so that they don't just think, okay, great, I'm going to go to her and see whether or not I should or I shouldn't do this. It's almost like, no, that should or shouldn't is not part of the conversation. Here's what you have. Here's what may be easy. Here's where challenges may come up or disconnect, which is an opportunity for growth. And if you don't want to grow, then don't go there. But otherwise, you're going to have that with everybody. There's going to be an upper limit. There's going to be a call to expansion in every relationship. And if you love a person and you're dedicated to them and you really want to build a life with them, you can. Here are the tools. That's what astrology is for. Here are the tools to help make that happen, right?
Totally. And, I think that like with a lot of people wonder like, okay, well, what's the difference between Western astrology, Vedic astrology? And I always say that it's very similar in that you have the planets, you have the signs, you have the houses. So whenever I do speak to my clients about Vedic astrology, I very much use still very similar terminology. The difference is really the calculations differ a lot, different system calculation, and that just purely comes down to your perspective of time, because time technically not like fully objective. Like in the Western calendar, there's 24 hours, one day, 365 days in 1 year. Like that's a very much accepted, Western lens. But in, Eastern culture and specifically in Vedic astrology, time is calculated a little bit differently according to the astrology. So there's actually roughly 23 hours, 56 minutes, and anywhere between 4 to 6 seconds. But that really varies day to day. And that's from the actual rotational movement of Earth on its axes, etc. So like, I don't want to get too science heavy into this, but like at the end of the day, I always tell my clients too, it's like, listen, if you don't resonate with Vedic astrology, if you're like, because your signs shift one. So in Western astrology, I'm a Cancer. In Vedic astrology, I'm a Gemini. And I get a lot of visceral reactions like, there's no way I'm that. Like I'm a hardcore Cancer. And I'm like, listen, if you resonate with Western astrology, like that's cool. You should do that. But some people actually find that they really resonate with Vedic astrology, or that they might resonate in this specific area for Vedic astrology, this specific area for Western astrology. But I always tell everybody that all rivers lead to the same ocean, whether you're getting a numerology reading or a tarot card reading or going to a psychic, like you're all going to be pinpointed to the same thing, because, my belief is that a good, healer, spiritual healer, whether it's an astrologer, psychic, tarot card reader, there's a big part that is like divine channeling that comes through. And so even before I read for my clients, I always pray to the universe, to God, like, let me send whatever message needs to come through from the charts. The chart's just a tool to help me understand, okay, what patterns am I supposed to see? Because the chart itself has like a million different patterns, millions of different combinations that you could easily spot. And so I always tell my clients, like, it's really a preference. I'm not going to argue that one system is better or more accurate, etc. this is just a personal preference. And I always tell people it's kind of like asking, what's the weather outside? If you ask a German person what's the temperature outside, they're going to answer you in Celsius. It's not wrong. If you ask an American, they're going to answer you most likely in Fahrenheit. That's not wrong. It's just a different system.
Yeah, no, I love that. The only reason why I haven't gotten into Vedic is because I'm so comfortable in Western, and it has resonated for me. It's not a, I recognize its effectiveness and people who love it. And I think that's great. I just, in my show, while having a Sag moon and definitely wanting to learn, like I've learned as much. I learn from the things that teach me something new, that give me a new perspective or a new way, a new insight that I didn't have before. And that's what I love about sort of deciding when the right divine timing is to talk about something. It's like, yeah, I see all the things that I could bring on. I have never done Enneagram because every time I dive down Enneagram, I go, yeah, astrology tells me the same thing. I don't need another system when astrology tells me what that does. Or I look at human design, which out of between the two of them, human design will probably be coming first in the future when I'm ready to sort of look at that system in a more expanded way. And that has done a little bit, but I can go to astrology and say, astrology tells me the same thing. Like it tells me the same. I get to the same place. So I don't know if I need to complicate with more stuff in my brain, something that I already have a system for. So, but I do know there are people who, like you said, prefer Vedic a lot more, and they resonate. Like you just said, I love that you use that word. They resonate more. The sign they choose, the readings they have, the way it's explained resonates with them more. And so I think that's great. Now, I'd love to, because you also have an app, and I want to talk about, for those of you who can't, like I asked you how they could find you to have a reading with you, but let's say, the majority of the people can't have a reading for whatever reason. And where are you in the world? You're not where are you?
So I'm like everywhere and nowhere at the same time.
You're a nomad.
When we were emailing, I was in Hyderabad, India, and then I think I rescheduled. And during when I rescheduled with you, I was in London, England, and now today, while filming, I am in Houston, Texas.
Okay, all right. Well, you're in the States right now, but so you don't have a permanent residency.
I'm still kind of trying to figure that piece out because I do spend a good chunk of time in India. It's very important for me to understand the culture. I don't think you can understand culture until you're like physically in it and breathing it and living it, which is why it was important for me to set up a base there. And like, let me tell you, I definitely have learned so much about Indian culture and just the value system and how different, because my app originally was really meant for a specific kind of audience. And of course, I end up like launching and it ends up becoming really popular in the US, but I'm also American. So it's an interesting cross kind of cultural situation, but I am establishing a base somewhere in the US, most likely Texas, but it's really between India, Texas. My business partner lives in London, so I'm always in Europe every year too. So those are kind of like the three main places.
Okay. So whenever it works on time zone, or if it doesn't work on time zone, you got to wait till she's in a different time zone for the whole, if you were to have a reading. I want to make sure that we give some people some value to use and to how to look at their I think we already have in terms of how to look at. Yeah, I will, until you said it, I don't know that I would have brought it up. That people just think, yeah, am I compatible? As a yes or no, check the box. And it's nowhere near that. So if you can take a step back and to also recognize that there are certain things that'll be, it's funny, my partner's son was going on a date. And when I saw him last in person, we were talking about it, and he's not necessarily in astrology, but I said, any chance you know her chart? And he's like, yeah, she sent me, like, she's on some app and I saw her chart and I know, and I have his chart on my iPad. So I pulled it out and I looked at it and I said, okay, well, you're probably going to have an ease of talking with each other. He's a Taurus, she was a Virgo. And I think they had the same element in the moon. And so I just sort of looked at some things. I'm like, okay, yeah, you guys definitely have some things that are going to feel relatable and easy and flowing. And then he came out of it and he's like, yeah, I liked her a lot. I don't know that there's a connection like romantically there. I said, well, great. Maybe you can just be friends for a little while. And that sometimes is better than that hot and heavy,
that is such an earth thing. Sorry, like not to interrupt you, but like I find that a lot of Taurus do end up with their earth counterparts like Capricorn and Virgo, and like they really take their sweet time in getting to know that person and like the commitment.
Oh no, I suggested that. He didn't. He's looking for the punch in the gut. Like I've heard him say twice, oh, she's going to wreck me. I'm thinking that's not a good thing. Like you're looking for that attraction only. And I was like, maybe just get to know them, like be a friend for a while. Like, cause that's, I did that. I did that attraction the first time around, and I did that like falling in love without being friends piece. And now I have my best friend, and and we were friends first, and I wouldn't, and again, nothing was wrong, but what a great thing to learn. So we're on our path. So what would be some of the things that you would recommend people do or look for, or we've already talked about changing the mindset from don't just think it's a simple yes or no, you're compatible or you're not. And then is your app free or is it a paid app?
It's free, so you can download it. It'll give you all of your Vedic placements, explain what it means. And then there is a compatibility section where we give you 3 free reports and you can put in whoever. I mean, I've had like moms do this with their kids and they love it. I've had, people do this with their business partners. So it's not just for romantic, and you can put in who have anyone's information, and it won't give you like charts overlapping because like 90% of people don't know how to read that, but it'll tell you off the bat, your core connection, which is really like rising suns, Venus, moons, and then it'll give you deep insights, which is actually more about how the karmic nodes interact with each other. And so something that I really love about Vedic astrology is they take the karmic nodes very, very, very seriously. It's Rahu and Ketu, or North Node, South Node. And I actually couldn't really find that as much in-depth information about the North Node, South Node when I was studying Western astrology. But in Vedic astrology, the karmic nodes, they say that the moon is the Wi-Fi connection to your current life and your past life and your karma and your future karma that you build. And so in Vedic astrology, the moon is really, really critical, like more important than I would even say the sun. So if you go to like a Hindu temple and you're like, hey, I want a ritual done, like I need some like spiritual healing, the priest will ask you what's your sign, but he's not referring to your sun sign. He's actually referring to the specific lunar mansion of your moon sign. And so there's a whole deep insight portion that will help you understand, why did this person come into your life? Because every single person in your life, whether it's like a 10-minute moment or it's, you know them for a month or years, there's always some kind of little purpose that they're serving, every single person, whether it's a mirror or a teacher or, there's some kind of karmic residue, etc. So the app will give you a little bit of information about that. And, at the end of the day, it's just to help people understand, because there are some connections, and I'm sure everyone can relate to this, that you're just like, I don't understand why. Like, why? And sometimes you need a tool to just there's only so much like psychology one can analyze, but sometimes you just need a tool to help you, a cosmic tool that connects you to the universe, that person to the universe, and that's your bridge. And so that's also a big part of what we're expanding on and building, but that's all in the compatibility report. So it is for free, and I wanted it to make it accessible for people so that, that was the mission, is I want everybody to have the tools and the guidance at their fingertips, and they don't need to specialize and pay the fee to get this crazy reading. Then it's like, okay, it's all right here. Like I want to make astrology accessible to people, especially Vedic astrology, which is very close to my heart and something that I'm really passionate about. So that's a little bit of what the compatibility report is. And a lot of people also I've noticed I get really upset about the score, and I think that that's something that's kind of like needs clarification, is like, just because you are not 100%, actually anything that's like above, I want to say anything that's above 50% in my book is actually really good. There's no 100%. Like that's a whole misconception in our world, is like, oh yeah, it's 100% compatible. Like that just doesn't exist. It really doesn't. And so people get really upset about the scores like this. Don't fixate on the number, fixate on the actual, my older sister and her girlfriend actually had a lot of prompting conversations around the compatibility because their score is a bit on the lower end. They're like, okay, why is this? Let's talk about some of the things that, resonate with us with the reading or don't resonate. And they went by one, looking at like the rising signs connecting, the Venus signs connecting, and they're like, does this resonate? Yes. Does this not? No. Okay, let's talk about like some of the friction that we have experienced in our relationship with the way that we handle certain things, that our outlook, the way that we process our emotions, etc. Whatever it is, and that's really what the tool is meant for. It's not really here to be like, yeah, I got, 75%, which is actually really high in the app. And that means that we're gonna get married and be together forever, or this is gonna be my best friend for life or whatnot. So that's really what the tool is intended for, is to like prompt conversation. Whether you agree with it or disagree with it is totally like, that's up to you. That's all on you. What resonates, I can't force that, and that's okay. It's not meant to, but it's really meant to just prompt those conversations of, is this your love language? Like, do you actually like, is this what you need? Do you need words of affirmation? Yes, I do. Okay, great. Now you know your partner's like actual love language. It's like, if you haven't been conscious of that, I think that's a really important tool for everybody to know.
Agreed. And, I think I'm afraid for me, only because I'm so deep into Western, because you and I literally are speaking the same language when you were talking about the moon. So I of all the astrologers that I've, that have published, that are sort of old school in the Western astrology world, Jan Spiller has been my favorite, and I work with them as a company, and I've created a course with their company, with Stephanie Shea, Cardinal Fire Astrology. And we, what Jan wrote, the moon, the true node book, basically, right? It's like your north and south node.
Yeah.
And you were talking about sometimes there's only so much psychology that you can do, which is true. And especially when you usually need the other person to be involved to understand that. But there are several times with a friend and with my ex that there was a situation that happened, and I went straight to that book and I looked up the true node, the north node, and I started reading about some of the stuff and answered the question. I was like, why did that person react the way they did? And before, I was frustrated by it. And then when I read it, I had compassion, and it resonated. I'm like, oh, okay. Past life, warrior, blah, 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 yada, 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 whatever. And I was like, oh, okay. And it just like answered it. And I felt so much better, and I had more compassion. And then the other one, why did she react that way? Why did she do that? And then I saw it. And again, it expanded me to a broader perspective. And then I had some compassion about what some of her struggles in this lifetime are, what her south node, what her true node are. And so I'm with you on that. I'm afraid of Vedic because I would probably like deep dive in and be like, oh yeah. Oh, and I don't want to do it. But I'm encouraging everybody who isn't as excited or mesmerized or as deep in as I am in Western to go check it out. And because I agree with you, there are people that say this doesn't resonate. Like they always say that I'm this, but that never really resonates with me. Cool. Then you should probably go looking at Vedic. Or if you're that kind of scientific person, I know some clients of mine, Aries, male clients, Gemini moon, who are so about the second of like being super accurate about like you're talking about that some days are a little bit shorter and some days are a little bit longer. Yeah. And if you want something more scientifically accurate like that, and you want to get in the weeds with that, then you need to go to Vedic and that, and check that out. So, the app link will be underneath this video on YouTube and in the show notes on the podcast. So, go ahead. Everything that we've talked about link wise will be available for you, underneath that. What would you say? And I love that explanation of, the score, because so many people play for points and they think that, yeah, again, it's that checking another box. Oh, we've passed. We don't have to work. We've passed. We don't need to do anything. And it's like, no. It's just giving you the toolbox for when it's inevitable that there will be a problem or a fight or a core wound pattern. Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, will come up. And you will know more and have more information when you have more information from your astrological chart to sort of deal with that answer. So in terms of other compatibilities and other ways that people can take any information they have right now, obviously the app is free, so that's something you can do right away. You can reach out to Sophie to have a reading, but take the dive into her app and definitely do this compatibility. On the app, do you have like relationship, differential relationships? So not just like love relationships, but friendships, or is it just general compatibility?
It's just general compatibility. Something that actually I recommend is there's a section of the app called StarMate, which actually gives you your ideal partner, your deal breakers, and what you emotionally need in a relationship. And I always tell people, and oftentimes this is what ends up happening is like, if you don't know yourself and you don't know what you want, why do you think you're going to attract like what you think you want? If you're like kind of like, I don't know, like maybe this person, maybe that, like I feel like that was a huge, huge part of my journey is actually figuring out, okay, what kind of person am I attracted to? Like just objectively, like the cosmic stars, like what does this say? This is the groundwork of, and you can easily disagree or agree, but it points out kind of the main themes. And so the star mate is definitely something that you should look at because it takes your rising sign and the rising sign and the seventh house information, in my opinion, is so critical to know. So if you know that like naturally you're attracted to partnerships that are very intense, you need a soulmate connection. So if your seventh house is ruled by Scorpio and you just like you need a soulmate connection, it's kind of like there's going to be a reason why you attract a little bit more tumultuous situations. And it's so funny because one of my girlfriends is like, I just want to marry for stability and comfort. And that's okay. That's totally fine. But I'm like, listen, girl, your, house of marriage is ruled by Scorpio. And that is not a sign that is about just stability and comfort. That is the opposite, actually, the total opposite. It's all about deep diving into like the depth, darkest pits of human existence. Like that is not this like kind of easy, cushy, comfy relationship row. Like, and so that section of the app, StarMate, will tell you essentially like what your ideal relationships really look like. And like I said, it's a starting point. You don't have to agree with it, but it's a way for you to actually get really clear. Because oftentimes we think I need a huge laundry list of all these things. And, when I first started my journey, of course I had that person. Like naturally, all of us are like, we want everything under the sun. And then you actually realize, wait a minute, these are actually the most important things for me that are deal breakers. And I think that that's actually a really great way to first figure out your journey. And, whenever I read for clients, I always start off with your own chart. Like, and I'll read what your ideal partner looks like, regardless of whoever I don't know who you're with or whatnot, but like I get first to that. And if it fits their partner, cool. If it doesn't, like, it's just prompting information. So I always recommend like start there, like figure out like what are your deal breakers. So a Western Sag moons, like we need adventure, we like learning, we like fun, like travel is kind of a deal breaker. Like if you're not really into like being active, like it's probably not gonna be a good fit, and then like, your sun sign Pisces, my sun sign's Cancer, like we need a lot of empathy. We're sensitive. We need compassion. Like that's a deal breaker. We need this kind of like intuitive, empathetic nurture. Like that is going to be something that's really critical. And so those are things that I would actually look at because first understanding your own individual journey it's kind of like the me before we situation. And so that's actually what I strongly encourage people to first do before you really get into the compatibility, because it's really all about knowing yourself and reconciling things that you think you need versus the things that you actually need. And like I said, it's a prompting guide. And so I really, really recommend people look at first, like the StarMate profile, which is more about like your ideal partner, your deal breakers, like what you emotionally need, and then go in, explore like your Venus sign, because that's like super important. Venus will tell you like what do you need in love, what makes you happy. Like in Western astrology, my Venus is in Gemini. So if you're not constantly messaging me and we're not chit chatting, it's not all about the like most in depth. I need you to talk to me all the time, every day, all day. So like that, take a look at that, that's really important. And so I would strongly recommend like go through and like look at your own stuff and then go through and look at your compatibility and see how well it gels or doesn't gel, etc. But like that's always something that I always encourage people is like start with you. And oftentimes in relationships, I think we make it all about the other person. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. And it's very easy to be like, well, this person's difficult. It's like, well, you were the one that attracted that person. You attracted them. So what about you attracted that person? Like kind of like look in the mirror and not in a malicious way, because I think we've all been there. We all have dated the red flags and the like, we've all had to have that growth, but every single relationship is just a mirror to you. And so that's why I always encourage my, my clients, like start with you. Like you got to start with you.
I'm only laughing because everybody who's listening, as you can, I've not talked to Sophie before today. Okay. And as far as I know, she probably hasn't listened to my show. So this is just, again, the illustration, demonstration of literally astrological compatibility, because literally everything that's coming out of your mouth is everything minus Vedic stuff is exactly what I teach and say, right? It's about taking responsibility, manifestation. You attracted them, like literally everything you're saying. So if you're smiling, I'm like just thinking that my clients and listeners are going, that's what JJ would say. That's what JJ would say. That's what JJ says all the time. That's what JJ, like, so again, we're both Sag moons and we're both water signs. So it's very, we're in alignment and you resonate with the people that resonate with me because of our resonance with each other and sort of how our point of view. And yeah, I think that when we come to compatibility and relationships, I am on that. If you are complaining about something you're not getting, you have to turn the mirror on yourself and see where you're not giving it to yourself, because you attract where you are, not what you want. And astrology is a great tool to use to start to look at what your needs are and how to get your own needs met so you can heal and vibrate at a level to attract the partner that's more like you, that resonates with you, versus looking outside of yourself for someone to complete you or someone to heal you or someone to make you happy, because then you delegate that responsibility and you'll never be happy because you're always waiting for you're living conditionally by saying, okay, well, if I have someone who does this, as long as they keep up that behavior, I'll be happy. But God forbid they change the behavior. All of a sudden now it's their fault you're not happy. This is called victim mentality. It will never work. It doesn't last. Please don't do it. So if you're on YouTube and you don't know what I'm talking about, head on over to jjfulzanes.tv, download Spirit, Purpose, and Energy. I have a whole 4-part series on victim mentality to understand that you are literally disempowering yourself. And astrology is such a powerful tool used correctly. Otherwise, it can be misused, like Sophie was talking about. If you're just looking for some site to tell you, yes, 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 check, 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 and then you think you're going to ride the wave of, I don't have to do any work. Well, wake up call. Yes, you will. And you won't help your relationship in any way, whether it be business partnership, which I do want to stick in that's another thing I wanted people. I didn't call this relationship astrology for a reason. Compatibility, even in your family, like looking at why you and your mother fight, or why you and your father don't get along, or why you and your brother are different. You can use astrology to start to have compassion and heal relationships that you've taken offense of because you haven't looked at the details of them plus you. You're just using astrology for romantic love. Please use it for all things, especially business partnerships, because business partnerships are like a marriage. So you better know what you're getting into, because you're going to be stuck with them for a while, or you're going to have a really hard exit because you assumed too many things. So I love that your app is free. I love that you're still doing readings. And anything else that we should be on lookout for that you have to offer people for, helping them with this conversation?
So the app, like I'm constantly working on it, and I'm actually really excited because next year, the beginning of next year, I will be releasing a new feature with relationships. So I think that the best way and like a lot of my girlfriends, they've been to couples counseling. It's perfectly normal, especially if you need help with managing some of the more sticky, difficult parts. But it's really, really helpful if you don't know how you're feeling in your relationship to actually like track that. Like, did you have a good day? Did you have a not great day? Why? And so we'll be releasing a feature where you could literally put like sad face, smiley face, or whatever range of faces. And at the aggregate end, like it will kind of help you, tally up like all the days that you were maybe not in a good place, because oftentimes like we kind of go off of like like the whim of like, and I mean, of like, oh yeah, like we had a really great week. And then like you'll have like 3 really bad weeks, but then you'll have another and like I kind of definitely experienced that where it's like everything's great. And then like it all kind of falls apart, but then you don't really have real data to understand like, wait a minute. Majority of the days were actually really good, right? Because you're living in whatever reality you create for yourself. And I think it's really easy to get lost in that moment. Or it could be opposite. Like you think you're like actually really happy and then you go back and you're like, wait a minute. 90% of the faces are sad faces. Like that's not good. And so that's a tool that is something that really personally I've invested in because I think it's really helpful. That will be released in the app. But that's also something that regardless of astrology is just a great tool for helping you understand like where you are in your relationship. And, it's really been inspired by actual people that have gone through the whole like couples counseling kind of situation where you're just like, I have no idea. I just don't know. And it's like, well, you got to start tracking these things and doing the work. So that's something I'm personally really excited about. But, at the end of the day, like I said, I'm just excited for anybody to find out more about what like really resonates with you in terms of better understanding how you connect to yourself, how you connect to other people, and how you connect to the universe. So that's really all I have to say.
Awesome. Sophie, thank you so much. I'm sure we could talk for hours. I feel definitely a resonance with you. And we say a lot of the same things. And I hope everyone's going to check out the app and download it. It's free. And all the links are either under this video or in the show notes. So thanks, Sophie, for all your wisdom and being in alignment with me and my community and sharing your great insight and reinforcing and inspiring people to look at compatibility differently.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.